What is needed is the right to print what one believes to be true, without having to fear bullying or blackmail from any side. We'll talk about it more. Welcome to the Opinionated Prepper. I'm Steve. And that was a quote from the prophet responsible for 1984, George Orwell. I think he had a lot more to say, and I think it was needed. I was going to talk today on a few conversations I had with friends and family all over the country, just seeing how things have been since the lockdowns and the flood of illegal immigrants, especially with people up north, their utility bills and all of the wonderful, wonderful laws being passed through Albany. Even being from a small town in the middle of the Catskill Mountains, you go one place, the town that I was born, and you don't see very much of a change except for extremely high utility bills. There's not really any utility blackouts or shortages. There wasn't a ton of shortages food-wise to speak of, but the prices raised extremely insane. And then you go just 20 miles away, which is a little bit closer to a city, and there's a pretty big influx of immigrants, which is very odd from where I'm from, because even though we had quite a few Puerto Rican and Nuyorican people, we didn't see that very much, but it's starting to become a big thing. Family members that were pushed into having something to continue work that they did not want, but they were in fear of their livelihood. But now their livelihood can't even support their family, and they need to be on state help when they were never on it before, with two people working in the house. Vehicles and vehicle repair costs, insurance and such, are extremely high, as is the rent. But I've noticed one thing: the land in central New York is still dirt cheap. And though I said I would never, ever, ever go back to that place, it's a fraction, and I mean a tenth, of the cost that it is down here where I am in Arkansas. So I'm thinking about getting some hunting land and maybe holiday cabin land, put it like that. And that's something that we can talk a little bit more about in a future episode. But I would like to swing back, dial back, go back, whatever that redheaded nitwit used to say all the time. Circle back. There you go. She's probably a hollaback girl. But I want to go back to a topic that I had a couple of days ago. And this is a rant, don't get me wrong, but hopefully it's to open eyes, digging a little bit more into stories that affect our freedom of speech and our monitoring of social media, and a very heavy hand when you go back to Craig Robertson, portly man that had to drive his car 200 yards to church, deemed a big teddy bear, deemed that even though he may have shot off his mouth and tell big stories, not only would he not do that, but he was physically incapable of doing anything, when the explanation from the FBI said that it was a true, credible threat. Well, they must be blind, because it just wouldn't happen. Wouldn't be able to happen. And he said himself that he was dreaming when he said that. He was an old man that was stuck in his home. He had strong political views. And even though it is not smart to do things like that, I don't condone violence, and I don't condone running your mouth off in a violent way, whether you can accomplish the things that you're talking about or not. It's just not smart, and it's not very appropriate. So I don't condone any of that stuff. But the use of excessive, extreme force by those boys in blue is unexcusable, inexcusable. It's not excusable. That man, at the most, should have been monitored, ankle monitor, placed under arrest. Taking his life was completely wrong. Completely wrong. And they said had the roads blocked, 50 officers. It's terrible. They were proving a point, but it might bite them in the butt. But what I really wanted to talk about, I wanted to bring that up a little bit because it was included in the topic of the attack on free speech. The Kansas newspaper, that's family owned, 150 years old, that was an extreme hobby for a lifelong journalist, that was raided, that kind of gets my dander up. And while, as I said, we're focusing on the floods and the economic downturn in China and the wildfires that devastated a community, many communities, wildfires that are happening in in a place in California. It's too late to need coffee, man. Wildfires, evacuating 4,000 acres, I believe. While we're focusing on that and we're keeping in mind about the downturn of our economy, the slowdown to almost halt, but it's not being talked about a ton. While we're focusing on that stuff and what we can do, how we can prepare for winter time, because it's a coming. The weather may not be as extreme being in an El Nino, but who's to say? Can't predict anything over these last few years. We cannot accept and trust that it's going to be just a normal season. So we need to be prepared for all of that. But the attack on speech is affecting us right now. And it's going under the radar for the most part, but you can see signs. You can see where it's going. And you need to prepare for that. That newspaper lost the co-owner, a 98-year-old woman, because of the extreme stress that raid caused. And I'll go into details on that raid just in case people don't know, but I would like to mention and bring up that while the woman was writing an op-ed piece, was talking about the raid, in mid-sentence she died. And she was saying, where are all of the good people to put a stop to this? Coming from a 98-year-old woman, such a cry for help, and her apparent death because of this, good people need to perk their ears up. It's a cry for help. It's a call. It's a dog whistle, if you will, for good people and strong people to stand up for the weaker people that cannot stand themselves. Her being attacked and bullied and blackmailed and threatened. Her getting their fingers injured because a police chief that was being investigated for sexual misconduct in another state at his previous job wanted to rip the phones out of the woman's hand. They came in and seized everything. And what started because an opinionated restaurant owner would not let the newspaper in to cover a congressman's speech because she didn't like them. Okay, it's her prerogative. Whatever. It's stopping free speech and stopping information and stopping the press because she wanted to be, yeah, how she was. But they got a call a little bit later that she had a drunk driving arrest on her record, and what made that pertinent was she was applying for a liquor license. And then the discussion comes up of should it affect her application for a liquor license if she has a history of alcohol abuse. The newspaper did their investigation, did a little bit, typed in the vital information to get back what they needed to get back, and they deemed that they thought they were a pawn in a vengeful scheme, that they were being set up and they were being used to get even with this restaurant owner who refused them access so they couldn't do their job. But they were still treating that restaurant owner right, saying, no, we're not going to be part of dragging names through the mud and all of that. Well, they phoned the police chief and they said, we're not going to do this, we think we're being set up, blah blah blah. And the police chief informed the restaurant owner, who pitched a fit even though the article wasn't being written, got angry with the newspaper, blamed them, went to the council meetings, started throwing accusations. Because she's a hoity-toity person, she wanted to put them out of business because they attacked her even though they didn't. Well, after a little while, an unreasonable search and seizure warrant was issued by a magistrate. And she is a lawyer, but in Kansas, for a magistrate judge, you don't have to have any legal experience, but she does, from a county over. They were going to post the probable cause affidavit, and they haven't gotten back to any other newspapers or anything. And people are looking at that warrant as in no judge in their right mind would have signed it. And she's not backing it up, she's not talking about it, she's not justifying her actions. She just did what she did. That caused them to come in like the Gestapo. The police also informed the chief of police that there was a tip that came about his sexual misconduct allegations, and they weren't going to go any further into the investigation because there was not enough reason, there was not enough proof there, and they weren't going to raise any accusations and start gossip or anything like that. They were not going to be part. And they told the police chief about his investigation and the restaurant owner's investigation because they thought that there was a conspiracy or an agenda to defame that police chief and the restaurant owner, and they weren't going to be a part of it. They were not going to be a tool. They stood up and did the right thing, but they got retaliated against. The police came in brandishing everything, took everything, mainly the laptop that the investigation information into the police chief contained, took the computers that handled the ads, took all personal phones, took everything. The warrant was saying that it was identity fraud and misuse of a computer because they typed a person's vital information, social security number or something, date of birth or driver's license number or something from the restaurant owner. Every time I do a video that pops up, I apologize. It was complete nonsense. It was wrong. A case got opened into how it was handled. Police chief was being a jerk, abused his authority. Reporters around that area are scared because now they think that if they do any of their due diligence and investigate anybody with a little bit of power in that community, that they're going to be targeted. So they don't want to do their job, which is imperative to a nation and for a nation. So people that have a little bit of power get away with everything, and they get to do what they want to do because they have bullied. I don't like bullies. I've always been a bully of bullies, and I will pay a price to stand up to bullies. Something I believe. I've said in previous videos that there's some things that are worse than death for a man. There's some things that you're willing to fight for. Some causes that can be the hill you're willing to give the ultimate price on. And I have a few. And having big bad old bullies that go and push everybody around are one of those hills that I'll stay on. And I'm hoping that there's more like me out there. Because if we let a restaurant owner turn into a chief of police, turn into a magistrate, turn into a governor or a mayor or a group of law enforcement officers or a council member or a congressman or senator or even president, when you let the smallest get away with something, the biggest will take that and run with it. That travels uphill. We're giving away our freedoms because we're scared, because the bullies are scaring us into giving up our lunch money. Well, as I've said before, bullies are like balloons. You pop them hard enough, they go away. Thank you, Rocky V. One of my favorite lines and one of my favorite movies. I don't care about the people that say that movie should have never been made. You don't know what you're talking about. But I digress. Are we going to stand up to these people? Are we going to find out who the good ones are and weed the bad ones out? Any abuse of authority for personal gain, those people should have authority stripped. They should. And we should not stop until authority is stripped from those people. We need our freedoms. We need our liberties. We don't need the air of liberty and freedom. We don't need the semblance of freedom and liberty. We need the actual thing. We can't keep getting lied to, having lip service paid, saying, oh yeah, you can still do things, you can still do things. We're not going to force you to take anything that you don't want to take. But, you know, maybe your employer might not let you have a job if you don't do it. Just saying, you might be worried about it. We can't let them say, well, you can post what you want and you can have free speech and you can say what you want to say and your social media page is yours. But if you say something that we don't like, your freedom might go away and you might be put on a list and you might be investigated, and who knows all of the things that we can find once you start getting investigated. That passive aggressive BS should not stand. If you have anything that you're hiding from, get it right. If you have anything that they can use against you, get rid of it. Stand up, be a sheepdog, make your voice heard, and let them know that your voice will not go down easily. I will put it like that. I am using YouTube's platform, and it is their platform. They own it, so if I want to be on it, I have to play by their rules. Just like if they want to come into my house and eat dinner, they have to play by my rules. So it's just courtesy. It's not being shut up. It's playing by the rules. But I just wanted that little rant to come out. I hope you guys can see where I'm coming from. This is an SHTF that's there now. If you want our children and our grandchildren to enjoy the freedom that we've had, to be able to speak our minds and say what we want to without fear of bullying, we need to protect it for them. It only takes one generation for freedom to die. God willing, we'll see you tomorrow.